Chapter 5. The incessant moan of the overhead vent droned on, accompanied by the rattle of the fan indolently spinning. The air in the room was damp and musty and close. It pressed on him, straining his breathing, which only further elevated his nerves. Niko fidgeted in his seat.
15 minutes late. 20 minutes late. What the fuck?
He thought, letting loose a long, disheartened breath. The stress of the moment gave flight to his nerves. He tapped his feet on the floor and drummed his fingers on his knees. The door to the conference room finally swung open, and 4 people filed in. The leader, Niko's old sack, Brent Rogers, had his head buried in a personnel file Niko assumed was his own. A burly man with thinning brown hair, Rogers wore a suit that looked a size too small, swathed over his muscular frame. Following Rogers were his ASACs, Burton Rodriguez and Jennifer Stewart. Stewart dressed smartly and wore a slackened, distant expression. Her eyes were rimmed in red. It didn't surprise Niko, but he wondered why they had her come in the first place. The person tailing the train made Niko's heart sink. Dr. Shelley Rosenberg. "I apologize for the delay, Ortez," Rogers started, devoid of eye contact. He and his team made their way to the seats across the table from him. "I was caught up in a press briefing that ran longer than expected. I hope you'll forgive the discourtesy." Niko swallowed, the dry contraction scraping at his throat. None of them so much as glanced his way until they sat. Dr. Rosenberg was the first to make eye contact, but her face was deadpan, as usual.
It's not a problem, sir.
Niko's voice was raspy. "I don't intend to take up much of your time, Ortez, so we'll make this brief," Rogers stated in his gruff voice, finally looking up from the folder. "I received your report concerning your last assignment. Considering this incident was over 6 months ago, I appreciate the level of detail you were able to articulate. It was noted that your report from today was consistent with your initial after-action report. From the Bureau's own investigation into the incident, we found no fault on your end." Rogers paused to study Niko, who sat stoic, marinating in his own nerves and sweat. He wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply processed the information from beneath what he hoped was an impassive expression. "I hope this information offers some level of comfort to you," Rogers continued. "The situation was a tragic one, and from what we can discern from your weekly visits with Dr. Rosenberg, the guilt of the incident has been weighing on you. Would you care to share your thoughts on this?" Niko's heart thumped as the flashing memories haunted him. They weighed like an anchor on his mind, disrupting the train of thought he was trying to summon to answer the question.
"Sir,"
he began,
"I appreciate the Bureau's decision of no fault, but that was never a concern for me. I wasn't worried about being held liable. I hold myself accountable in my own way. The training I received should have prepared me for such a situation, but fear kept me rooted to the floor. My lack of response meant officers died, and I feel guilty about that. I'm still trying to absolve myself of that guilt."
Niko wrung his hands together and continued tapping his feet on the floor.
"I've tried to explain away the pain of the incident in my sessions with Dr. Rosenberg, but no matter how hard I tried to deflect, the hard truth is that I failed to assess the situation enough to do the right thing. As a result, those men escaped justice."
Niko's eyes met Rogers. As he peered over his glasses, his hand paused between turning pages in the folder. Agent Stewart shuffled in her seat.
"I may not have been responsible for what happened to those officers, but I didn't act in service of their deaths either. That failure still hangs over me. My ineptitude brought grief to their families, and that knowledge weighs on me every day. I understand this testimony doesn't bode well for my career, but I feel it necessary to be transparent."
Niko paused to take a breath, his voice beginning to shake with nerves. He glanced around the room to see everyone intently focused on him. all except for Agent Stewart, who stared into her lap. He closed his eyes and continued.
You asked if this decision offers me comfort. Well, I'm relieved to know I'm cleared in the eyes of the Bureau. The decision doesn't change what happened. The event has marked me in a way I will never forget, and the lessons learned from this I will carry to the end of my career.
Niko gripped his knees. The piercing stares and the weight of judgment bore down on him. Rogers and Rosenberg began jotting down notes in their files. Rodriguez zoned into the wood grain of the table, and Stewart avoided Niko's gaze entirely. Her eyes glossed over with tears. He wasn't naive to the reason. He watched her brother die, and that guilt fell on him. He couldn't imagine the pain she was in, having to live through that moment again, and there was nothing he could do to ease her suffering. He found himself wondering again why she was there. Was it by choice or duty? The droning of the overhead vent returned to drown out the uneasy silence. The squeak of the fan textured the moan like mocking laughter. Niko was relieved at having been honest, but not without the supplementary doubt of it, the uncertain course his career would take following his confession. He rolled the dice, and the rest was left to fate. No matter the decision, he swore he wouldn't let himself regret his candor. He couldn't. It was the only sense of morality he felt from the whole ordeal. Brent cleared his throat, and the silence dissipated. It's remarkable to me how much like your father you are. He considered Niko with a steady gaze. Niko flushed with embarrassment, and his heart rapped violently at his ribcage. You could have lied, Brent said. You could have paraded with confidence, shrugging off your responsibility under the pretext that the Bureau had absolved you of guilt on paper. I've seen agents do it countless times. But you wear your failures with humble admonition. It was in that humility that I developed a great deal of respect for your father. And now, for you. I agree with your statement that there is more you could have done, but I also agree with the decision of no fault. We are only human after all. I take comfort in your self-awareness, and it leads me to believe that the weight of this mistake will make you more cautious, or persistent in the future. I hope I'm not wrong about that. Rogers returned to his document and flipped through a few pages. The beat of Niko's heart steadied. I am providing a recommendation to terminate your probation and return you to active special agent status. This is conditional on the conclusion of your psychological review. Dr. Rosenberg will keep me updated on the results. As I recall, you have 3 months of counseling remaining. Dr. Rosenberg nodded. The two ASACs scribbled frivolous notes, reminders of the tasks they would need to complete to get him reinstated, he imagined. I hope to see an improvement in your mental state, Brent said. Carrying guilt is a laborious task, Niko. It has its benefits, but it's a poison that can impair your judgment and dilute good intentions with careless mistakes. Focus on clearing your head. He stood, followed by his two subordinates. Until then, complete your required duties here, whatever they need. I know Flieger can be a bit abrasive, and that's likely to get worse when this news reaches him. All the same, I expect you to respect his command. We will reevaluate in 3 months. Rogers and his team filed out of the room. Niko let out a long, shaky breath, raising his hands behind his head and leaning back in his chair. A weight slid from his shoulders. A smile crept onto his face, and the burden of anxiety uncoiled from his chest. He swiveled lazily in his chair, drinking in the pleasure of the moment. But all such pleasures were forgotten when his eyes fell on Dr. Rosenberg, still observing him from her seat. Her eyes poised, she studied him from beyond her emerald-rimmed glasses. The tension in the room was palpable. Niko brimming with nerves and Dr. Rosenberg as reticent and pensive as ever. His eyes flitted over the features of her face, trying to read her, but she kept her impassive demeanor. A necessary consequence of years of analyzing officers, agents, and detectives. The creases around her lips finally relaxed, and she diverted her attention to her notepad and scribbled a short thought. Following a quick breath, she broke the silence.
I trust you are aware of my position regarding our sessions.
He wasn't. He stared at her, skimming the archives of his memories for anything she might be indicating. She didn't wait for him to respond.
I decided to omit the issue of your anxiety from my report to Rogers, but it is an issue that will need to be addressed if you expect me to clear you to return to the field. Of course, he's no fool, so he has his suspicions.
Niko shifted his eyes. That was what Rogers was questioning earlier. Of course he knew. Rogers' career began in interrogation, reading people, and Niko's struggle with anxiety might as well have been a neon sign.
You won't admit to it, but I'm not a fool either. I've left the issue for you to address at your own pace, but it appears you'll require more of a push before you face this subject. Perhaps this meeting was just what you needed, but I won't endorse your reinstatement if you don't open up.
Niko's chest tightened at the thought of digging into the topic. He hadn't realized he was avoiding the subject, but his reaction gave an indication of why. It made sense, but it didn't make the situation easier. He wanted nothing more than to return to fieldwork, to escape from beneath the power-hungry hand of Flieger, who would undoubtedly increase the pressure of his perceived dominance while he still could. He had been holding his breath and attempted to ease himself down with a slow exhale. Dr. Rosenberg nodded as she jotted down more notes.
We are not exploring the topic today, so you can relax. I wanted you to be prepared, as this will be the primary focus for the next 3 months.
She gathered her documents and stood, but hesitated. Her pensive eyes danced in thought for a moment. She gazed at him. Her brows creased, and a moment of genuine emotion escaped her, surprising Niko.
I take great pride in my work, Niko. What I do ensures people can respond in critical situations and save lives. You can understand the weight on me. If I should fail, I bear some responsibility for those deaths. Because of that, I will not grant any exceptions to my expectations. I have heard you are a gifted agent with a keen mind and a careful eye, but that will not absolve you from this exercise. I expect you to take these remaining sessions seriously. Lives do depend on it.
She fled the room, leaving Niko alone with his thoughts. The impact of her words lingered, echoing through his head until the hum of the fan returned, interrupting the growing silence, its drone heavier somehow. His hands rested on his knees, his palms slick with sweat. Glancing around the empty room, marinating in the conflicting emotions, he tried to make sense of the chaos entombed within him. He knew the challenges ahead so intimately they pressed on his chest. The thought occurred to him it may well be his own anxieties instead. That was followed by the afterthought they were one in the same. His nervousness was a challenge, and the more he reflected on it, the more he realized the impact it had on him. He stood up from his chair, slid it back under the large oak table, and left the room. Making his way from the building to his car, his mind organized and catalogued, attempting to declutter the mess of thoughts and arrange them into something more coherent.
Hell yeah!
Harrington cheered through rosy cheeks, his voice muffled beneath the commotion of the bar.
Dude, that is awesome news!
He raised his glass and toasted with Niko. He was drunk. Brindle, on the other hand, composed himself a little more cordially. He smiled and nodded as he nursed his whiskey neat, a cigarette resting on a crystal ashtray. Niko gulped back a mouthful of Yingling. Brindle returned his glass to its black napkin and gripped Niko's shoulder. I'm happy for you, he said. But more importantly, I'm happy I don't have to hear you bitch and moan anymore. Harrington chuckled.
I'll drink to that. Oh, I'm still going to bitch and moan,
Niko said.
It's what I do. It's who I am.
They laughed. Harrington turned his attention to a group of women sitting next to them at the bar, slurring his words through failed one-liners and boozy swagger. Brindle glanced beyond Niko, who sat between the two, to watch Mikey strike out and chuckled to himself when he did. There was something about the arrogance of the young and single he missed. He had told Niko.
It's not that he misses it.
Niko thought.
It's nostalgia.
It reminded him of the times he spent chasing his wife in his youth. There was a positive attachment to it that helped him overlook the humiliation. Niko watched the foam settle in his drink, thinking back to the meeting and the conflicting emotions. He was happy to be reinstated, but the thought of facing his trauma seemed overwhelming, especially with everything else going on. He bounced his feet on the crossbar of the stool as he rolled his finger along the brim of the glass. I need some air. Brindle slapped him on the back. Let's step outside. Niko nodded and jumped off the stool to follow him out. They exited into the humid evening, Brindle already priming another cigarette at his lips. He took a long drag, exhaled a cloud of smoke, and pondered the sky for a moment. The shopping center around them was alive with light, but the focus was the sports bar where they stood outside, a popular place called Barry's Tap House. Talk to me, Brindle said. Niko paced a short way down the sidewalk and turned back toward Brindle, who was leaning against the brick exterior.
I don't want to go home tonight,
he replied. Brindle eyed him, his cigarette hanging limply from his hand by his side. Okay, he said with a confused glance. You're gonna have to give me more than that. Niko ran his hand through his hair and rubbed away the tension in his neck. He paused in his steps, looked up, and breathed heavily.
Today's been chaotic, but so far it's ending on a good note. If I go home, I'm gonna have to break the news to Dee that Flieger is sending me on travel the weekend we're supposed to visit her family. She won't like that. She'll blame the fight we had last night and throw some spiteful accusations, likely implying that I never wanted to go in the first place. I just don't want to deal with it. I want tonight to end on this good note.
You think the best solution is to avoid the conversation? Brindle took another drag from his cigarette.
No.
Niko sighed.
But maybe delay it? I don't know.
It'll be waiting for you when you go back home. Only it'll be worse, because you're intentionally avoiding her. She'll like that even less. Niko didn't respond. Instead, he gave a lackadaisical nod. I thought the same way. Brindle flicked his cigarette away and prepped another. I used to avoid confrontation with Emily. It was easier for me to drag it out until she forgot or just moved on. It was always trivial. I justified it by telling myself I didn't want to have memories of us fighting. Just the good times. But now, I wish I would have spent more time talking to her. Sure, we would have argued, but doing what I did caused a coldness between us. Now that she's gone, that coldness is all I remember. Brindle lowered his head. Tendrils of smoke wove a delicate dance along his arm, ephemeral spirits captured by the evening breeze. With a tremulous breath, a smoky veil enshrouded his face. Don't do what I did, kid. I know you love her. You talk tough like you don't, but I know you better than that. If I've learned anything, it's that if something's important to you, you make the time for it. If you dodge the issue now for your own petty reasons, it'll only widen the distance. You'll miss these moments when they are gone, and you can't get them back. Niko stepped over to Brindle and patted him on the shoulder. He was being selfish. His problems seemed so small in comparison. While he worried about a tough conversation with Danielle, the woman he loved, Brindle was coping with the fact he would never have another conversation, tough or otherwise, with the woman he loved. A tear slid down Brindle's cheek, but his face remained stoic. Niko pointed at the cigarette.
You know, those things will kill you.
Brindle examined the butt and gave Niko a weak smile and a soft chuckle.
You're right,
Niko said, fidgeting with the keys in his pocket.
I'm gonna head out of here and get this conversation out of the way.
Smart man, Brindle said, a distant sorrow coloring the depths of his eyes.
You and Mikey gonna be all right?
Yeah, we'll call a cab. Don't worry about us. Just go take care of business. Juggling his keys briefly, he pondered the man's advice before making his way to his car. He drove home in the quiet. Imaginary scenarios ran through his mind of the conversation he was about to have. He played out different approaches, trying to settle on something sympathetic. He decided to make it up to her with a vacation when he got back. As he turned onto his street, however, his heart sank. There was a car in his driveway he didn't recognize.